Hello and welcome to episode 38 of the Ski Instructor Podcast. My name's Dave Burrows and I'm the director and owner of Snow Pro Ski School based here in Val d'Illier in Switzerland. You've caught me on a day when there was a big storm gone through Switzerland last night, and we've had snow down to about 2,000 metres, and it's starting to feel quite wintry actually, which is nice. It's nice to see snow on the mountains, and it's kind of motivated me to get my diary in order to go and ski. But I'm starting a little bit later deliberately this year. I don't really need to start skiing in August, to be honest. So I'm going to go and get my ski season started in the next couple of weeks or so, work commitments aside, because the football season's gone a bit crazy this autumn. But hopefully I should have a week off coming up fairly soon, and I'll go up and stay in Saas-Fee for a few days, and with any luck the stars will align and it'll be open down to Marinia, and we can get some decent mileage under the skis, which will be lovely. I've got a brilliant interview this week, one that I really enjoyed doing with Dan Egan. It's a little bit of red meat for you guys from the US, who make up about 40% of the listenership of this podcast, and I thank you very much, you guys, for listening. Dan's a US ski and snowboard Hall of Famer, and he's featured in numerous Warren Miller ski movies. He runs his own camps and clinics in the US and Europe, and he just brought out a new book. So Dan got in touch with me. He's brought out a new book. It's called 30 Years in a White Haze, and it talks about kind of him growing up, how he sort of got his start in the industry, and then the sort of the evolution of extreme skiing and the stuff that he was doing in the late 80s and 90s, which is quite a sort of seminal time for around our industry. It's an amazing book. I ploughed through it in 2 or 3 days, and it was difficult to put down, and it was a really interesting read. So highly recommended, and we talk a bit about that in the book, and it's certainly something that I'd recommend to you to read, and it's quite different from all of the other ski books that I've read in the past. In this part one, we talk about his book a little bit. We also talk about other books, so there's a few tangents already going on. Talking about growing up skiing, influences, coaching kids, and also a bit about polar exploration. In this podcast, we had a little bit of interference on the line. I've tried to edit it out as much as I possibly can. It was either interference on the line or one of those kind of singing bugs that you get in the garden. Also cowbells you might hear, and also some guy turned on like a circular saw in the other garden. So there's a few random noises in this one, but I think it should be fine with what I've done in the post edit. So enjoy this first half, and I will catch up with you somewhere in the middle. Dan Egan, welcome to the Ski Instructor Podcast. How are you?
I'm doing great today, David. It's looking forward to winter, and here in New England, back on the East Coast, temperatures shifted a little bit into a more fall temperature, and we're going to see the leaves turning soon.
Well, New England, let's talk about that straight away. I'm going to dive into, because I didn't tell you I was going to talk about this, but you're originally from Boston, aren't you? And
yes, I am.
I've been looking around for books to read for ages, right? And so thank you very much for, we're here to talk about a little bit about your book and you, but contained within your book is a recommendation for another book, which was called Blue Highways, right?
Yes.
What a book. Thanks for the recommendation. I've just gone through that. I've never really read a book that's kind of written like that before. It's absolutely brilliant. It's a crazy, like a real sort of, what would you call, like a historical document.
Yeah, I think Blue Highways is amazing. That book of traveling around off of the beaten path, don't get on the highways or the interstates, and travel the Blue Highways. Ever since I've read that book way back in the 90s, I've done that. And I did it again this summer. I drove across country off of the highways.
Oh.
And it was awesome. And I've done it now 3 times during the 4th of July. And if you want to see Americana, you drive through Iowa and South Dakota, in some of these farm states on the 4th of July. It's really a sight to be seen. It's beautiful.
I did my time traveled around the US by train, actually, once. And I remember going through those northern states, the Dakotas and stuff like that. I went out from Chicago across to Washington State. And there's I mean, I don't think it's an understatement to say there is nothing there. I sat and looked out of a train window for 12 hours and it didn't change at all. I was like, this is vast, this place. Much bigger than you could possibly imagine. The scale of the country that you live in is incredible.
It really is incredible. And I think it's not fully understood from outside the States when you think about the diversity of our culture in this country. And why there's so many different points of view on such a big place. It starts to make sense when you see the scope and scale of it. And the other thing is, the folklore of the West. And, that you can make it in the West, that the dreams are born, go West, young man. All these sort of things that Americans grow up with. And I think that's still true today. I think people are still seeking their fortunes by going west. Yeah.
Well, talking of the East, while we're still on literary references, I've just finished going through all of the Robert B. Parker Spencer detective novels. It's set in Boston. And they are brilliant. I don't know whether you've ever read them, but my goodness, if you ever have a chance, the character Spencer and the way that the author describes Boston, which will probably resonate with you when you're growing up, is absolutely brilliant books, and I'm gutted that I've sort of finished them.
Yeah, it's that is a great character, and those are great, amazing books. And there's so many films and things have been produced in and around Boston, just in commercials, and the Boston accent. It's really quite something when you can park your car and go over there and do those sorts of things. And, and it's such a rich city as far as culture goes and diversity. And in my childhood in the 70s, Boston was a very, very active city on so many fronts.
Yeah, I can imagine. Well, let's talk a little bit about that, because Boston, although you're relatively close to that sort of East Coast skiing scene, I was really interested to read. So you've just published a book, 30 Years in a White Haze. Your story of you and your brother and the sort of evolution of extreme skiing. You were in and around that scene growing up. You've been in something like 8 or 9 Warren Miller films, and you're in the US Skiing Hall of Fame. So there's a lot that's gone into this book, a lot about that journey. But how does a kid from Boston end up part of the extreme skiing scene all over the world?
Yeah, I think that's a question that we really dive into in the book, because it's an unlikely scenario, right? We weren't a mountain family. We didn't own a house in the North Country. We didn't go away on weekends to ski. We weren't part of ski teams. We were just a big group of kids. There were originally 8 kids in the family, and my mom had her hands full, and my mom was a gym teacher, and so she loved sport, and she just got us all out of the house. And she had grown up the only girl in a family of 6 boys, and as a kid, she skied in the 40s in Boston, down the center strip of the Parkway. And my grandfather lived on the highest hill in the city.
Okay.
So that was a really pretty crazy ski run. When I look at it, it wasn't very wide, and they had one pair of wooden skis and a pair of boots, and all the kids shared it. So, my mom was into skiing. My dad was into skiing. My dad, as a boy, would walk 4 miles in his leather boots to ski in the local golf court in the city he lived in, the city of Quincy, outside of Boston. So, and so they were both skiers. My dad was a sailor, and they joined us up for a ski club. So on Saturdays in the winter, probably 6 to 7 Saturdays a year, we would get on a bus out at the highway and go skiing. And it was my mother's way of getting a day off. She put all the kids on the bus, even my dad. And so, and part of the deal with joining that ski club was that we had to take lessons. So I took traditional PSIA ski lessons from, really the age of 5 till I was 16. We couldn't not take the lessons if you got on the bus. So, and you progressed. You got a letter or a patch when you moved on to a higher group, and eventually you became part of this demo team, which would be considered an all mountain ski team today. So. That was pretty exciting for me, and being competitive. Of course, I wanted to get on the demo team. My older brothers had been on the demo team, and that propelled me to try and get my skills better. But then, really, an odd twist of fate was my oldest brother Bob, after college, worked at a ski shop in Boston called the Ski Market, and the Ski Market went on to be the biggest ski retailer in the country, in the States. They owned 21 locations at their heyday, and Bob ran one of the stores not far from our home for 10 years. And there, as a teenager, I worked in the ski shop, and eventually as a sales guy and a ski technician. But more importantly, I got to meet all the sales reps, all from Rossignol and K2 and Kesley and all the different brands. And I went to all of the clinics on the different products. I even, my freshman year of high school, wrote a project on how to make a ski. And so I really got to meet a lot of people in the industry through that ski shop. While that was happening, my older brother John was a ski bum. He had run away from home to ski at Sugarbush, Vermont, and he was getting really good at skiing. And my parents were not wanting me to go visit him. They had forbid it because he was 6 years older, and it wasn't appropriate for a kid my age to visit a ski bum. So those worlds kind of started to set the roots for, one, John raising the bar of what it meant to be a skier, and two, me learning about the ski industry. And when finally we got to the point, decades later, when we actually made a movie, the ski industry was there for the Egan brothers, because those reps had become the head of marketing at Solomon and Head and Rossi. They knew us and they supported us.
So, just to take you a little bit back to that ski club, it's quite interesting actually, because I just said to you off air that it's September now, everyone's kind of starting to wake up to the possibility that snow's coming again in December, and I've just gone into a couple of the schools that we work with, put together all of the program that we're doing for winter, and it's quite an exciting time, because whoever those people were that were putting in place that sort of bus, that coach that went to the ski mountain when you were young, and put in place the program of the lessons. That's kind of what I'm doing right now. So that's always been ongoing. You never know, I suppose, who the next Dan Egan is going to be out of all those little kids. You never know who you're going to influence, with what you do and what you put in place. But the important thing is that you're doing it. So you're giving the access to those kids, and you're sort of making skiing available to them. When you think back to those days, like, do you remember any particular coaches or anyone that was sort of particularly influential for you, and what it was that was influential about them?
No, that's a great question, because it's so true, right? You never know what's going to spark, what's going to connect with kids, and coaches are, in my opinion, the most important people in young development, because they have access to children in a really powerful way. And there's generally some sort of bonding that goes on between athletes and coaches and mentors, gym teachers in general. And so for me, I had teachers all around me. My grandfather was an educator, superintendent of Boston schools. My uncle was an educator in the Boston schools. My mom was a gym teacher. And they were all teachers around me. And my soccer coach, Tom Herget, in the 4th grade, he started town soccer. We had never had a travel team or a soccer program in the town. Mm-hmm. He was the high school coach, and he was a young man. He's in his 20s when he first came to my elementary school. And so Tom really Coach Herget opened up a world for us and all our friends, my friends. We started playing soccer. And, when that 4th grade class became the senior class in the high school, we had our first winning record for the town. And, and what Tom really instilled in me and my friends, we're all still friends today, was this idea of character, what it took to have a noble character in the face of losing, and how do you overcome this, and how do you represent the town and yourself well. And he had a very high standard, and he was a very gentle motivator, but we had to sort of meet his standard of character. And so that really, and the other thing that he did, which I was used to because I was number 6 in a family of 8, was he had us training with older players the whole time. So when I was in elementary school, we trained with the junior high. When we were in junior high, we trained with the high school, and in high school I played on a men's league. So that idea of playing up, the idea of being mentored by other players and networking was sort of anchored in there. So by the time I'm a teenager and I'm working with older people at the ski market, I have this idea of mentorship and how these people might potentially help me down the road. So, from the specific ski club side, we took lessons from the Europeans that had ski schools here in New England. Paul and Paula Villar, Egan Zimmerman, these were Olympians and real big names. And they had Austrian instructors throughout their ski schools. So my ski school, the Blizzard Ski Club, when we went to the Egan, the Paul and Paula Villar Ski School at Sunapee, Mount Sunapee in New Hampshire, they were drill sergeants. Those Austrians, they loved technique. We would side step up, side slip down, side step up, side slip down. And we would do angulation drills. And, these are early days for snowmaking, really firm, hard East Coast conditions, icy snow. And technique was really important. So what was instilled in me was repetition and the importance of technique, and the idea of practicing, and repeating it and doing it again. So, I was kind of getting it from all fronts as an athlete. And I would say that those Austrians, what they really instilled with me is that ski technique matters, Anybody can go straight and go fast, but here's how you turn properly, and here's how you can relate that turn into moguls, onto ice, and onto mogul and racing. So that's super interesting. And all the while, my older brothers, both Bobby and John, were amazing skiers. So they were great athletes. So they wouldn't wait for me. They would ditch me. I was 8 and 6 years younger than them. And so for me to try to keep up, I had to get good, and I had to sort of earn their respect.
Yeah. That Austrian school of things that, and that sort of, drilling of technique, if you could transport yourself and that style, like, into the present day, do you think that would fly? Because a lot of the stuff now that is about teaching, they talk about, safety, enjoyment, learning, fun, being, learning through games, that kind of stuff. I wonder, I'm thinking about the clients that we deal with, if we were too hard on some of the kids these days, here's me sounding like a grumpy old man again, but if we were like, if we were being that hard on kids these days, they would probably go back and tell their parents that it wasn't much fun, and then we wouldn't see them again. So either teaching's evolved or kids have become more sensitive, maybe. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Here's where I draw the line, right? Because, you motivate through different ways. Kids, what hasn't changed is kids still want to achieve. There's still a desire to be good at. We see that in the X Games and the Olympics. As the age gets younger, kids are younger medalists all the time. So kids want to be pushed. The problem is the system isn't set up to push them anymore, because we're afraid to hurt their feelings, or we're afraid they're not going to like it, right? But they're longing for the challenge, and they're up for the challenge. So from the beginning, in my coaching, I set the bar. This is what we're going to achieve, and I make it fun on the way to achieving it, but not easy. And I think the problem that educators have fallen into, and parents, quite honestly, is they want to be liked, and they're more vested in being liked than being respected, and there's a difference. So, I was the middle school soccer coach for, I think, close to 8 or 9 years. So much so that, third graders would say, I want to play for you, the team looked like a team. They dressed as a team. There was something to emulate, right?
Yeah.
And so I think these things matter. And as far as like sort of the drills go, we have to give kids more credit. They're willing to work hard. They're willing to work. If Johnny's not willing to work hard, but Susie is, Johnny eventually wakes up and sees, wow, Susie's getting good. Like, so they're peer-to-peer illustrations and examples are also equally important. This idea of group teach, we're going to teach this method. That's not how I grew up, right? I grew up being taught through an individual method. This person is learning this way, or this is learning that way. I remember, my physics teacher in high school relating everything to a boat. Now that I could do, right? I understand pulleys. I understand that. But it wasn't, and he made an effort to give me those illustrations. Well, he made the kid next to me a different illustration. So one thing the kids really respond to is their name. They want to hear their name. And adults want to hear their name. So when you call somebody by name, they respond. Yeah. So for an example, when I coach soccer, I never know why coaches do this. They do mass substitution, right? Well, the problem with a mass substitution is you didn't call the individual by name. So I only put in 1 or 2 people at a time, and I call them by name. Jennifer, Gary, get over here. Now they're important, right?
Yeah.
Now they're recognized, and you're being recognized. Now look, I'm calling you guys. I need you right now in these positions for these reasons. Okay? Now go do your best. Well, that's a mission. I've put them on a mission, right? So if you put drilling into context, hey, we're going to learn, first of all, you have to think about manifestation, how we're going to manifest a bigger idea, right? Mm-hmm. Then you have to set the intention. You want to go off the jumps, don't you? Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm going to help you get off the jump. Before we get off the jump, we have to learn about speed control, speed checking, how you manage the speed before the ramp. So then we're going to do these series of drills that accomplish that. And when you break it down with an intention and the idea of manifestation, one day you're going to do a trick, then their minds fall into line. And that's the beauty of what we know today, because we know the mechanics of that.
Yeah.
So from my point of view, I think, teaching, it depends on the teacher and the mentor. Like there's an easy way out and there's an educational way to achieve a goal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I'm with you on that. And the name thing is actually really, really important. Especially the way that I tend to try and coach football, especially in a sort of, in a drills and coaching kind of situation. But the other thing is also match play will be if someone does something good, you use their name and you praise them publicly for that. If you see something good, say, John, that was amazing. And you can do that within the game. You don't need to stop the game for that. He hears it and all of his mates hear it. It's really important that. And, one of the other things that I've been trying to use lately, which I think it seems to be really, really, it works really well from about 5 to 9 years old, is that you can stop. Say you see something amazing, or you're in the middle of a drill. Stop the session. You say, "Stop it! Everyone, stop what you're doing. Look over there at little Johnny, and watch him do this, because he's got it. That guy's got it. He's doing it perfectly." And get him to do it, and all the others will be like, "Oh, well, he's just been like praised publicly. I'm going to try and do it as well." And you should see the response you get out of that. They're like, "Oh, am I doing it as good as him?" And this and the other, and it's a real motivator,
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's great, right? Because now they're vested in it, right?
Yeah.
Now they're vested in it. And so I think it's really important, I really do. And as you know from all your teaching and coaching, is like the reward for that is when they get older and the few that come back, right? For me, that's the reward.
Yeah, that's right. And whoever it was in those old days that sort of created a Dan Egan or as whatever. It's interesting that concept of being around older people. I'm not sure how much that happens anymore. And some of the most confident young people I know are sort of exposed to that world. And I remember when I was growing up, here we go, me doing that grumpy old man thing again. But when I was growing up, my parents had, they still have, it's just literally closed out after 45 years. They've retired now. But I used to go and work on weekend mornings and holidays in my parents' business, which was an electrical wholesaler's business. And they'd get me down there, and that's kind of how I'd earn my pocket money, fetching and carrying stuff. This is from 9-10 years old or something like that. And then by the time I got to sort of 12, 13 or whatever, I was on the trade counter, like dealing with builders and plumbers and electricians, like selling them stuff. And I didn't really feel very confident about it. Never really got a handle on it. I always felt a bit self-conscious when I was young, and I still do to a certain extent. But because sometimes when you're teaching, it's all for me it feels a bit like a bit of an act. I'm not necessarily who people think I am. But the long story short is that hanging around with those older people it sort of forces you to grow up. It forces you a little bit to be, how would you say, kind of wise beyond your years slightly, and it sort of shows you how things work as a kid. Although that, I think that should be balanced also against what we're doing as a society at the moment, which is kind of allowing our children to grow up a little bit too fast. So I think there's a balance between the two.
That's true, right? Because technology, even as adults, we're consumed by it other than really utilizing it, right?
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
But you hit on a couple of things, and I talk about this in the book. What my parents instilled in us was confidence and independence. And they did that, like you say, without making it a goal. They didn't say, hey, I'm going to make you confident and independent. If you do this, you'll be confident and independent. No, they said, no, you're going to be responsible. Do the chores you're told, show up on time. Do not quit. Go out into the world, and I think that confidence and independence is sort of really good. And as you say, of course, there's a questioning, or am I ready for this, or I'm nervous, right? But we did it anyways. And that's the most important thing, is you do it anyways. Even as an adult, managing different projects, all the different companies I've started, all these sort of things, I tell myself, just keep doing it. Just keep doing it. Do it again. It's working. It's working. Do it again. And, I do that with athletes. I don't say, hey, you created a great edge angle on that turn. I said, that was a good turn. Do it again. I let them internalize it. Do it again. Without analyzing it. That was good. Do it again. Don't do that. What should I do? That's my favorite ski tip, Yeah. What should I do? Not that. Don't do that.
Yeah.
Well, what should I do? Well, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't drop my hand. What's the alternative, right? So, this idea of breaking patterns is to have an equal and opposite reaction, right, to the pattern you're in. And then internalize that feeling. How'd that feel? Felt great. Really? Felt amazing. Okay, go do it again. And now they're thinking about how they felt. The old saying that we're not thinking machines that feel, we're feeling machines that think.
Yeah.
And so we want to persuade through emotion. We're not going to persuade through logic. Why are we using logic, particularly with kids? We need emotion, That's why when you use words like amazing, or that was outrageous, or that was so good, that you're triggering emotion. And when you point out the good play in the player, it's not like, he used the outside of his foot and he wheeled the ball. It was like, Johnny, wheel the ball. Now you guys do that, right? So this idea of just of doing what you see, and all of the great, explorers or people who have been sort of on the edge of things, the idea that if one person could do it, so can I. So can I. And why not me, right? Instead of why me, why not me? And so I think my brother and I, as skiers from the city, by the time I started racing, I was, in my mid to late teens. I didn't know anything about the kid, was a great junior champion or this or that. I didn't care about who I was racing. He was a fast racer. So why not me? Why not me? And so I just took the Northern kids on full blast. Like, I came out of the city, had never raced an organized race. I got to top 10 in New England in high school and state champion. So, like, I just assumed I would win. Why wouldn't I? Why wouldn't I?
I like it, but where do you think that comes from? I'll give you an example. Because this is like, and listener, this is a short hop into the weird and wonderful world of my mind. Like every summer, it feels like a little bit. You get to April, tidy up the ski season, finish all your admin and stuff, and then summer. You've got summer. June, July, August, nothing happens. No one's thinking about skiing whatsoever. It feels a little bit like going into, like, round the dark side of the moon or whatever. And everyone's, radio silence, can't get hold of anyone, blah, blah, blah. And like every year, even though I know that it always comes back, it's hard to not doubt yourself. Like you sit there and you say, oh, crikey. But where does that thing that you were talking about, that sort of, why not me, that sort of innate self-confidence, or is it curiosity? Like, where does that come from in you? Or was it, is that something you were born with, do you think?
I think it's a combination of things. I think some people are born to be intrepid, but, like I said, my mom, she threw all the kids out of the house. Get out of the house. And she didn't care. I mean, she did care. I don't mean to say she didn't care. But it wasn't like we went for group activities. My younger brother, he went to play baseball. He didn't. I went to sail. We played soccer together, but in the summer we did separate things. Now, my sailing required me to walk a quarter mile to the trolley, take the trolley to the train, take the train to the bus, and walk a half mile to the yacht club in the city, in a rough city. This wasn't like a, blue collar. It was a blue collar working yacht club. It wasn't a highfalutin yacht club. And it was a tough place. You had to earn your stripes. Like, I would be challenged on those buses and those trains and in the city streets. Who are you? Where do you go? Where do you hang? How do you, what do you, who are you coming in here? And out on the sailing water, out on the boats, I gained some confidence. Hey, I can do this. And then I had to make my way back through those street corners to get home. So that when I talk about confidence and independence, there's a price to be paid. The question is how much you're willing to pay. Like, I really wanted to sail, so I was willing to pay the price of walking the gauntlet, so to speak, down those city streets, right? And then gaining confidence in that. And I think, this idea to do your best, right? It's sort of like a little bit, what if my best stinks?
Yeah, but at least you did your best, right?
Yeah, so the question is, it's always, to me, that saying is like, you did your best, but your best wasn't very good. Maybe it should be, phrased differently, maybe instead of, well, you did your best, it should be like, well, what'd you take away? What'd you learn? And how are you gonna improve on that? And then part of it is, I'm an Irish kid, my favorite Irish saying is this a private fight or can anybody be involved? That's my personality to be involved. It's my personality to wake up swinging. I want to be in the game. I don't want to be on the sideline. And, my mom basically, there were no half measures. You're either all in or you're all out. Which are you?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think that's partially where it comes from.
Okay. Just before we move on, I wanted to. I think it's not curious. That would be wrong. So one of the things that struck me about reading your book was this whole concept of right place, right time. When we were, you happened upon, your brothers were skiing before you, of course, but when you were coming up and you finished all of the stuff that you were going to do and you made the full-time decision to go skiing, it sort of coincided, same thing with the people that you knew in the industry and so on and so forth. It all sort of seemed to have, there's a lot to be said in life, being in the right place at the right time. And, by accident of birth, I guess, like the date when you were born, you happened upon that scene. Whereas if you were there, say, even 10 years later, you probably would have missed a whole bunch of that stuff that essentially made you famous, right? It led you to all the other stuff that you've done since. Is that something you reflect on, or how, is it considered luck, or? what?
I think it's, sort of a spiritual principle that we're all born for the right time and right place. Mm-hmm. There's a purpose.
Yeah.
So it's bigger than us, right? And although, some are born, in different economic circumstances and this and that, but they're all born for the right place, the right time, and with a purpose. And, if I hadn't been a skier, if I had it my way, I would have played soccer. Mm-hmm. But I was too short and too slow. I got pretty far. I played a high level, played for, a sort of an institution team that had won 5 national championships. Our teams never did that in my 4 years in college, but it was a known soccer powerhouse. Mm-hmm. But it was also, and still is, one of the best private, voted the best private business school in the United States. So the fact that I went there to play soccer and I ended up with a business education that really fueled my life, that allowed me to see the situations I was in. We talk about this in the book, I tied our career to the technological boom of the day, which was the VCR.
Yeah.
And I understood that the VCR was going to be our window into people's homes. And I then negotiated the rights to those films that we skied in. And then I started owning the footage in the films that we skied in. So, we're all born for the right time and the right place and the right opportunities. The question is, do you see them, right? And the ones that you don't see, do you see the next one? Now, there's plenty of things that I missed. I was in the right place at the right time and said the wrong thing or did the wrong thing. That's also true. That's the beauty of age, is that you can look back and go, I could have done better, should have maybe not insulted that person or whatever,
Yeah.
And so this idea that, look, when I think of Lewis and Clark walking across the country, paddling boats up river, not down river, up river, I was not born for that time. Mm-hmm. I wasn't born to wrestle grizzly bears, I was born to slay other giants in my life, but the giants of the day.
Yeah.
When I look at the kids today, I can see that they're born and bred and raised in a culture to slay the giants of their day. My nephews that are using technology for driverless cars and founded companies and got funded, they did far more in business than I've ever done. And they were born for the right time in the right place. So I find it a fascinating concept that, we all have that in us. And I think that that's really the beauty, of the human condition. You can do it. There's countless stories of people overcoming and doing it in their day.
Yeah. No, that's true. That's true. It's funny. You say that. I was going to mention another anecdote about football, but maybe I'll come back. Soccer. I'll come back to that in a minute. But one of the funny, I think that the youngsters probably see opportunity slightly better than you do. But as I think I see my opportunity here. If you had to kind of put a name on what I'm doing, I know what my niche is, and I know that I can go after it, and I can, to a certain extent, try and do the best I possibly can in the industry that I'm in. But when I look around at other opportunities, and opportunities that may have existed in my father's day and stuff like that, you think to yourself, oh crikey, it's hard these days. I think if you're a kid, you look around, you think of something, but a lot of stuff has already been done, or is already being done by multiple people. Whatever you can think of, chances are someone else has already thought of it. But maybe I only see it from my perspective. I don't see it from the perspective of a 20-year-old. I don't know whether that's just a thing that happens.
Well, this idea of the collective thought, right? That the idea is not yours. It's owned by the collective. It's owned by the greater. So when you enter into the collective, then that's where the connections live. So that's where the possibilities are. Because just because somebody had thought about it doesn't mean they had seen the application of it or the production of it. And that's what I like, when I'll get an idea, I'm going to make this film, or I'm going to write this book, or, I'm going to, produce a live sailing event 4 miles off the coast. Well, I have the idea, but then I have to find the guy who can create the wireless network 4 miles off the coast, right? And I meet that guy, and I see him using that application in a different application, and I go, is it possible to move this thing off the coast? And he says something like, I've always wondered about that. Well, now we're in cahoots, right?
Yeah.
Because now we let's do it. So the idea that, so this is kind of goes back to this idea of how we educate kids, how we motivate kids, how we move kids forward. We don't want to sort of plant that seed that, well, just because, we don't want to lower the bar. We want to raise the bar. And we want to illustrate how, and we see this all over the globe these days, how one idea, a world away can be mirrored, in someplace else. Now, if you connect those two people who both thought of that idea, then watch out what happens. It's possible. So I love that. And I think if anybody look, for me, today I see YouTube and I'm like, wow, what would I have done with that? I was working with a VCR. I had to find skiers to buy my videotape who owned VCRs because they really weren't even everybody's home yet. So, if I can overcome that, what can you do where technology is already pre-existing? What can I, and then, I just had this discussion the other day, like young athletes, whether it doesn't matter in the sport, like how are you going to stand out? So many kids have that skill. They all have that skill. What are you going to do? How are you going to do it? How are you going to express? How are you going to carry yourself? Whose name are you going to remember? Like, how are you going to do it? Raise the bar.
Yeah, it's true. That's essentially my philosophy for skiing. Because you get into it, you open a ski school, right? And you think, well, there's a bunch of other people. And so my sort of overriding philosophy with the ski school is how can I do this, but do this better than what has gone before?
Yeah.
It drives everything. It's really, really important. The other thing about soccer is that I can't play competitive football anymore. I can't do 90 minutes. My body won't hold up. But I play on a Tuesday night with a bunch of similarly old guys, and my goodness, like now I have to. Do you remember the days when you just used to turn up, kick a ball around a bit, and just start playing? Now I have to do like a warm up. Like a proper warm-up, stretching all sorts of bits and pieces out and doing all sorts of movement. And then, like, just for days after it hurts. And you say, what? And I'm so slow. That's the worst bit about it. Just so slow these days. My mind knows what I want to do, but my body will not execute it anymore. I'm just like, oh, it's awful. It's a horrible feeling that you just can't do it anymore like you used to. Luckily, I can still ski a bit, but crikey, like it's I don't know. Right, you've mentioned a couple of times about this sort of perseverance thing, and in your book, I thought was really, really interesting. So I've read books about Shackleton. I've read books about the Amundsen, the early Norwegian explorers. And what those guys were doing in the late 1800s, early 1900s was just... the word today I think would be crazy, really. They had no idea what they were doing when they went on some of these polar expeditions to the Antarctic and the Norwegians when they were going to the North Pole and crossing Greenland. I remember reading one of the books, which was about the first expedition. The idea was to cross Greenland, right? These guys floated around on icebergs for like 12 months before they even got to the land. And they're volunteers signing up for these expeditions. I absolutely cannot... The other one I read was Tom Crean's book, or the book about Tom Crean, who was one of Shackleton's kind of guides, right-hand man. It's just extraordinary what these guys were doing. You know, they had no real idea that they would get out of any of it alive either. Is that, I mean, what do you take from those guys when you read about stuff like that?
You know, it's true, and you talk about being born for a time. Like, wow,
yeah,
and the gear, you know, what they're wearing, and you know, today we'd call somebody out of their minds to go to the Arctic or the Antarctic dressed like that, you know.
Yeah.
But what you see is this idea of perseverance, you know, and this idea of possibility. And how that drives mankind to be the first, to do something that's never been done, to go to see something that hasn't been seen, and how powerful that is as a motivator. You also see the economics of the day. You know, what were they leaving behind? It couldn't have been all that comfortable. They were like going to cram themselves into a ship.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, so they whatever was their current day situation, this looked better, and that's like, that would blow your mind too. Like, really, that looked better? And then and then what you see, and particularly in the Shackleton story because it's so well written, is you see them come into the now. You know, the quote I put in there, you know, is that, you know, they've been living on the ice for 3+ months. They're sewing their pants, and the guy writes in his the diary, "What an ingrate I had been when others did this for me. One of the finest days I've ever had." You know, how are they finding peace in the storm? How are they finding contentment inside, internal contentment? Well, they're living in the now. They're seeing the beauty and the power of the place, and they know that to worry is futile. It's only going to kill them. That if you don't come into the now and deal with the what is in the moment, you'll never get to manifest the intention of survival. And that's really powerful, right? So, you know, that's what's beautiful about reading these stories. You know, the other quote in Shackleton, in Endurance, is, you know, they were tested and found not wanting.
Yeah.
And I think that, you know, I'm so soft when I whine about my wanting today sitting. You know what I mean? Like, just, you know, I own 2 cars. I ski in the West and around the world. Like, what's wrong in my, you know, there's nothing wrong, right? So, you know, this idea, have you been tested and found not wanting? And if you look across, you don't have to go far, go to social media, turn on the news. You just hear of the not wanting, the people who are wanting. They need this, they got to have that, this isn't fair, and all these sort of things. So, you know, what I find is those early guys, and Lewis and Clark, all of them, they had a peace with themselves. And then you have to look at yourself in history. Like, we're really, I don't know about you, but like, I know people, you know, I'm saving photograph albums, you know, possessions that really mean nothing, but somehow trying to preserve some sort of legacy in this world, right? But when you read those adventure stories about the guys that, you know, walked across America or sailed to Antarctica and got frozen in, like, you know, they're living. They're living. So, you know, what is it? Are you going to be known for? The living or the preserving, right? So, or the gathering. You know, we all get the pick. And the motivation for me is in the living. What's next? And that's what you see in those early days, because they were on the edge. I mean, that's the equivalent of going to the moon or Mars.
Yeah, it was then. Yeah. Mine, the one that comes up on me, it's on my list actually. The one is I've become very aware of this concept of legacy since my daughter arrived, and so I'm very much kind of now trying to build something for the future. That's quite important to me now. You know, I feel like I've done a lot of living, but now it's time to sort of create something. Kind of, I don't know, like leave something behind, I suppose, maybe. I don't know, but I think when you talk about that as an individual, you talk about leaving something behind, that doesn't really work for me, because I don't really value, I don't place that higher value on my own kind of self-importance, you know, like it wouldn't bother me. I don't think anyone's going to particularly miss me if I'm gone, you know. So it's a tricky one, that. It's a tricky one.
I hope you enjoyed the first half of the interview that I did with Dan here. It's amazing how much kind of how similar we think about a lot of things, similar things that we're into, similar books and that kind of thing. I think that really came through in the interview is kind of how well we gelled, and Dan's certainly a sort of a really easy guy to get on with, and I very, very much enjoyed the conversation that we had. The podcast this is probably going to take us past like 55,000 episode downloads, which is just absolutely amazing, and I've got some really cool podcasts coming up actually that are already in the can and ready to go. One is about ski boots and ski boot fitting, what we should be looking for and that kind of thing. That's with Colin Martin of Solutions for Feet in the UK. And I've also got a 2-part interview, because it went on so long, with John Olsen, who's a ski instructor based in Verbier with New Generation Ski School. I've also got 2 or 3 others that I need to do, which I need to get round to doing, because I want to do a sort of roundtable kind of Christmas special thing, but I need to tell the people that I'm planning to do that with, so I need to get on with that. In this second part of the podcast, we talk about sort of ski tech changes and technique that comes with that. We talk about the sort of infamous trip that Dan did to Mount Elbrus in sort of around 1990 odd, and that was kind of, I'd say, one of the defining points of his life, but also the story is amazing. Goes into super detail about that on the book and in the book, and it was really extraordinary story, really. We also touch on some thoughts about the Free Wide World Tour and also sobriety, which is another interesting tangent. So I really sincerely hope that you enjoy the second half, and I will catch you when I come back and I've had a chance to edit up those other podcasts that I was talking about earlier. Hope you're all well and you're all getting excited about the ski season, and I will catch you on the next episode.
Let me talk to you. It ties into there's some amazing writing in your book about the Mount Elbrus expedition that you did. But just before we get to that, it's extremely ambitious, really, considering that you weren't so much an alpinist, more of a kind of known to be I guess an extreme skier in those days, and you were skiing about. I've seen, all you have to do, listeners, is go on YouTube, look up Dan Egan, look at some of the stuff that he was skiing back in the day on the skis that you were skiing it on. One of my colleagues in the industry said this to me the other day. I wrote it on social media. Said this was back in the day when people didn't film themselves unless they could really, really ski, because the equipment was difficult and there wasn't really the access. So you wouldn't put out a VHS tape unless you were pretty confident in deep snow on those old skis, 220s or whatever, skinny, 60 odd mil underfoot. Well, one, what was it like to ski that stuff? Presumably you didn't have the awareness of avalanche and stuff, but secondly, presumably you don't ski on that kind of equipment anymore.
Yeah, skiing on those skis was an athletic feat. It required a lot of athleticism. And that basically meant there was a lot of movement. Movement mattered. Up and down, pumping your legs, reaching with your arms. Because we skied in the snow, not on it.
Yeah.
Today, we on it. So when you're in it, you got to get out of it. And you got to go back in it. You got to get out of it. When people see the amount of turns we made, they're exhausted by looking at it. We were doing jump turns for 4, 5, 6, 7,000 vertical feet. There's one shot in a Warren Miller film with the famed skier Kevin Andrews and myself. 75 powder 8 turns. We would have won any powder 8 contest of the day. I mean, they're unbelievable. They're in Portillo, Chile, and 75. And the run ended with a train trestle that we jumped over, and then we continued our powder 8s. So the timing of that is amazing, right? So, what it was athleticism. Of course, we didn't know any different because there wasn't any different, and so being a student of the sport and the movements and the repetition that I learned as a kid, it was mattered to me. And I like that comment, that this was back in the day when you wouldn't shoot yourself if you weren't very good. I mean, it's somewhat true. But when you look across the sort of the genre of the ski movies, there were some amazing athletes on skis, both Olympians and otherwise. So it was really something. I think it was very athletic. When you talk about getting, playing a soccer game and being sore afterwards.
Yeah.
Ski runs back then and not being sore, in perspective, it's like I couldn't imagine today, right? So it's really quite something. And, it's different today. Movement is refined on the bigger ski, the wider ski, the shaped ski. It's a little more efficient, a lot more efficient. And people are skiing faster because they're on the snow, not in the snow. And that speed has brought a new element to things. It's allowed, sort of for bigger tricks and other things that we couldn't do. So it's a game changer, the technology, as it always is. And it's just a different playing field today.
Having skied both, is there a part of you that kind of misses those old days? The old equipment, the old style?
Only in a sort of romantic way. In my springtime home in Val d'Isere, I've got a beautiful pair of Elan, 116, wide.
Yeah.
And, some people, that's narrow for them today. They're skiing on 120s and wire and all this. But 116 for me is as wide as I go. And I only use that ski in France because there's space for that ski. So I think that there's sort of there's a right tool for the job today, depending on the place and where you ski. I joke with Jason Leventhal of J Skis and the founder of Line Skis, that an 88 underfoot is wide, and they scoff at it. I've shown up to the helipad in Alaska with my 88s. And the new school kids are like, who's the old man, right? And I'm like, I'm on a really wide ski. So, I don't sort of miss, the 210s, and they weren't that efficient. We made them work, but the new technology is far superior. I don't think, there's no going back sort of thing. It's just like when you drive a new car and then you go back into the hot rod of the 70s. They look cool, but they drive like shitty, Don't really work. So, it's all that sort of thing. So, I don't know. I love the new stuff. And, of course, I'm older, so I appreciate it more. It's allowed me to stay in the game. It's allowed me to continue to get off-piste a lot. And I have some limits to it. I still prefer to turn than to straight line. I still think turning by an untracked piece of snow is like unforgivable. Like I want to track it, and I don't want my tracks to be straight. I love turning. I love the feeling. The whole reason why I ski is to turn. And let's face it, I turn for the feeling of the G4. That's what I'm addicted to. I say all the time, we are of the turning generation. There's a whole group of kids out there that don't know what that feels like. And they don't appreciate it the way we do because they're doing something else.
Before we go on to the Elbrus stuff, let's jump into that, because I think that ties in with, I'd love to chat with you about, skiing philosophy and what you're about. And that's the second conversation in about 3 days I've had about being in the turn, and the turn is where it's at. I've bored the listeners to death with my own kind of philosophy about what skiing is to me, and I try to regard it as a sort of aesthetic thing or a personal expression thing, really. But for you, the turn, what does the turn mean to you?
Well, the turn is the place where I experience acceleration. The turn is, I always tell people, if you're turning to slow down, you're in conflict with the technology on your feet. I've never met one ski engineer that told me they built a ski to go slow. The ski is built to accelerate. Let's be honest about that. Of course, there's braking motions, so I can have a controllable acceleration, but the essence of a ski is to arc. And I'm addicted to that feeling because, I hook up, I engage, my feet move, my body goes with it. The challenge is, can I keep my upper body with my accelerating feet over my feet? All those sort of things. But in between those turns is the transition. And that is peaceful, right? Like, to me, that's the silence between the notes. The turn is the expression of skiing, but the transition is the internalization of skiing. And so you can't get to transition if you don't turn, right? So, and I mean a proper arcing, accelerating turn. I don't mean a tail sliding, skiddy, slashy turn. I see no joy in that. The kids that are, I'm a cranky old man too, right? I mean, I get it. The white roam looks fun when you create your own cloud and ski through it. It doesn't do this. For me, you're missing the G-force there. That's a braking move, and it looks cool, but I don't see where the joy is other than on social media. Like, the internal joy of that, I don't know. But I do know that when my skis hook up on edge and they accelerate through that turn, I'm ignited. And I get to do it again after I pass through that beautiful, peaceful and transition. And my skis touch again, and I'm gone. And I have chased that my entire life.
But that doesn't sound to me, respectfully, that doesn't sound to me very much like what... That sounds like more of a sort of an on-piste focus, where you're known for kind of off-piste clinics and extreme clinics and that kind of thing. Are we talking about the same thing?
Yeah, I mean, we hone in on that in powder, in windblown, in corn snow, off-piste, hooking up the ski. And, of course, we talk about all feathering and speed control and all these sorts of things. We don't want people accelerating in the off-piste to the unknown, right? But it's still the essence of skiing is the turn, all of the body motions. What's happening with the new ski and the lack of motion people are using is that their body is behind their feet essentially. Mm-hmm. So they're slashing or skidding or the lower third of the turn.
Yeah.
And they're skiing to brake. Why are they skiing to brake? Well, they haven't put together the idea that the surface area is overpowering their motion. You know, when you have a 98 underfoot or a 106 underfoot in a, I'll call it short, in a 168 or 171, you're still skiing on a 210.
Yeah.
It just looks different, right? And with that increased surface area under your foot, I talk about this in all my instructional writing, there's only one place for your foot to go. It's in front of your hip. Mm-hmm. And it's super to be an athlete with your feet in front of your hips.
Yeah.
So how do you regain that body position to pull those feet under your hip? Well, you do that in your transitions, right? You do that in the body alignment. You do that in the pole planting. You do that in where you look. We need that off-piste, in the off-piste, probably even more than on the piste. I think turning is the essence. And the other, really curious and interesting thing about the ski equipment today is it has its own purpose. So, make sure you're on the right ski for the right day in the right conditions, because it matters. And if you're a groom skier, well, get a piste ski and enjoy that. If you're going out of bounds or off piste and you want to ski in the powder, yeah, you're going to want something to float. But you don't need the same ski that you would go heli skiing in, for sure.
Yeah, I agree. When you talk about the move that you make in transition, let's get right into it. When at that moment of transition, your move to get the next turn going, where do you think that's coming from? And then are you quite square at transition, or are you having a slight, are you having any kind of rotation or rotational separation at that point? How would you best describe the move that you make to catch up with those accelerating skis and to put the skis behind you ready for the next turn?
Yeah, we should state that I'm qualified in nothing, right? Like I have no certified in nothing, okay? So I hold no certificates. I've only owned experience. And I teach from that point. Mm-hmm. I look at kids racing today. Mm-hmm. All I see is their hips are too far back and they're being coached to do it.
Okay.
And I don't see them standing up. Nobody, the great teaching institutions of the world have basically thrown up, out. They don't want it anymore. Talk about through. Mm-hmm. Well, let me tell you what. That works at the highest level. When you have somebody who understands body mechanics and can do it and knows what you are describing. Yeah. But for a young athlete developing who doesn't know what the word through is or move through the turn, they need to see, experience, and internalize what that feels like. And the way to teach that is to get them to stand up. And get forward. So how do I see this working out? This has been such a disaster for the U.S. ski team that we don't even have a male skier on the World Cup slalom circuit.
Yeah, who was the last guy was David Chudowski, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're not being successful in this technique. I'm sorry. These kids cannot handle the transition. We know that because they're blowing out of courses. And because of the point system, they don't need to finish these races anymore. They can just blow out and say, I'll do it again tomorrow in a different race. Mm-hmm. You used to have to climb up, go around the gate, and finish the damn race. So we're instilling quitting, right? We're teaching them to be we're trying to get them to be in balance from an out of balance position. And the problem I see is it's because they're looking at imagery of Michaela Schifrin with a low hip, but only when her feet are extended out to the side.
Yeah.
But when she's in transition, her feet are under her hips. And that might be in a quick moment. It doesn't, and she's, extending in that moment, not squatting, Mm-hmm. So it's super important. So when you ask me that question, I'm a believer in standing up. So as my skis accelerate for a number of different reasons, one, basically they're designed to accelerate, and two, I know how to punch it, so they're going to accelerate. That means my feet are going to be in front of my hip. The easiest and fastest way for this old dog to regain balance is to stand up and to put my hips, shoulders, and hands forward and dive into the next turn and let that foot go out and under me again. So, yes, I do believe, there's different techniques. There's oftentimes I ski with a ton of rotation and separation. Lower body rotation, upper body somewhat square. Of course, it's never 100% square, right? Mm-hmm. But somewhat square. And other times, if I'm arcing, I might be more countered with my upper body. And that's the other thing. Have we, as an industry, progressed our teaching to the technology? I give it a flat no. Flat no.
Yeah, that's interesting.
We have not said, if you're skiing on a 106, here's a 106 technique, and we need to. Mm-hmm. What we're saying, here's how you turn, regardless of what skis you're on. That's not true today. Mm. That was true 30, 40 years ago. But now we have kids with, and skiers of all types, skiing in AT boots where there's no ankle flexion built into the construction of the boot. Mm-hmm. Where kids whose shafts of those boots are not flexed forward, they're straight up and down. Yeah. So when you have a straight up down knee, how do you angle it? When you're on a wide ski, what's the technique for that? Because actually banking on a wide ski makes a ton of sense, and it works really, really well.
That's right.
But we don't really teach it, or it's not part of our instruction manuals anywhere that I can find. Particularly at the interski level. So, I'm challenging the industry. Let's catch up to the technology that the manufacturers have created. We're all stuck in the dark ages with our ski technique, and if you don't believe me, look at the results of the U.S. and the UK ski teams. It's not very good. So what's going on here? What's going on here? Maybe we should go back to the basic athletic movements that keep people balanced, well in motion. Yeah. Fires me up. Yeah. Fires me up, David.
No, I'm with you. I hear you. And there's definitely something to be said for that, especially with regards to people who... I've had this before, people show up for lessons on extremely fat skis and they're looking for kind of piece technique. And you're like, well, we're not really going to get anywhere with what you've got on your feet. I can give you the generics, but, you're trying to ski a vocal mantra down a red run that's, hard. You're not really going to get very far, with what the movements you need to be able to make to ski this slope competently. You ain't going to be able to make them because your skis are too wide. And unless you have extremely flexible knees and durable knees, you're not going to be able to make those movements that you need to make because the sheer leveraged force you're going to need to get those skis over onto an edge, and kind of the ability in your hip to get that kind of width between your knees is not going to happen on those skis. And we've talked also before.
And specifically, what's going to happen, right, is they're going to take the inside ski and use it as a platform instead of putting it on edge.
Yeah, you can't help it because it's so wide. Right, exactly. It's in the way. You can't get it out of the way. It's too big. Yeah, I agree. And then the other thing that we've talked about extensively on this podcast before, I think, is the design of kids ski boots. The one I especially hate are those ones with the extra buckle across the ankle. The three buckle ones, and you like just say to the kids, you got to go back, or the parents, you have to go back to you have to go back to the rental shop, to wherever you got these from, and change them, because your kid is not going to progress out of a snowplow with this boot on. It's just not going to happen. So get the ability for your kid to be able to flex their ankle, and then we can talk, because otherwise you're just wasting your money. I'll take it, but I don't want to take it. I would like to get your child to be better at skiing, right?
What do you prefer?
Just a regular ski boot. Like it needs to have one or two buckles across the foot, and then it needs to have a proper cuff. So it needs to have a cuff that's hinged at the ankle, and it needs to have one or two buckles at the top, depending on the age of the kid and the size of the boot. But what you cannot do is have that. You must know the kind of boot that I'm talking about, and I don't know who makes it, but I see it all the time. It's like it's like the old what do you call it?
No, but the three buckle boot, because
it's got a buckle that goes across the ankle, and so in the actual eventual angle, it's like a right angle. It has no forward lean, and kids they're already balanced slightly back because their head is heavier in proportion to the rest of their body. So if you then restrict the ability of that kid to kind of flex his or her ankle forward, it's just not going to work. You're wasting your time.
Right.
It drives me bananas. The same as you, it just hypes me up. That particular subject. Anyway. Let me. It's not a great place to go back to, but you do an amazing write-up in your book about that really ambitious expedition to Mount Elbrus in Russia. Those of you who want to read the whole account, you can read it in the book for sure, and I'll link to that in the podcast. You were going there to promote a brand, is it Degré 7 that you were going there for, and basically conditions went against you, and you got caught in a big storm on one of the most deadly mountains amongst the 7 peaks, and your idea was to ski back down and that kind of thing. A lot of people died in that storm, and you managed to get out of it. When you look back at that, presumably you recognise yourself as sort of young and terribly ambitious at that time. Is that what you take away from it with that historical perspective?
Yeah, it was an ambitious climb, and it was a misconceived trip from the onset. The idea that we would climb and ski one of the 7 summits of the world, and that Degree 7 ran a promotion around the world that if you bought a piece of clothing, you were entered into the contest, and people won a trip to Elbrus, Russia, the USSR, before the fall, just for buying a beanie. Their only qualification was they bought a beanie. And Patrick Valentine had passed away, and they wanted to celebrate Patrick's life. And what they wanted to do was run a promotion where people got to see basically the Valentine guides in Chamonix come together with these up-and-coming extremists from the U.S. Mm-hmm. And that was going to be a feature on ESPN at the time. So there was some, just in there, what I said, anybody with any sort of mountain experience might think, should we rethink this? So, I personally was all about it. I wanted to go. We were super excited to be sponsored by Degree 7. Patrick Valençant was one of my brother John's heroes. John had skied with Valençant and met Valençant in Chamonix in the mid 80s. And, they would just be coming distributed in the U.S. and I saw an opportunity for a sponsorship deal. And so they loved it. But, in hindsight, I was not prepared to go to, altitude. Although one of the things I say is, in the book is my 24-year-old self would have always chosen to do what he did. My 57-year-old self, probably not. But my 20 self, I was gonna take the challenge.
What year was it, Elbrus, this expedition?
1990. Yeah.
1990.
Yeah.
It's an interesting time. The reason I say that is because I always look back at the kind of the music and the culture of the kind of the 80s or late 80s, and there was a sort of like, I know that you were in and around the music scene as well at that time, and like I look back at just how big some of the bands and some of the rock musicians and stuff were at that time. Like the sheer scale of ambition that was going on in that time, like everywhere really, was quite amazing. If you grew up around that time, it's probably no coincidence that you would go. You think, yeah, I'll just go to Elbrus, we'll climb that and we'll ski back down it. Like how hard could it be, right?
Yeah,
it's a strange time in time, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, it was a very interesting time, and of course, if you grew up during the Cold War, the idea that you were going to go into Mother Russia was like something I had never really thought of before, like that. And we were just, the wall came down in the fall of '89. It was just starting to crumble, the Iron Curtain. And for an 80s kid to go, to sort of the unbidden, the kingdom that you would never could have, the evil kingdom, that was quite something. When we got to very interesting times, because when you got to Russia, what did people know of America, right? They knew McDonald's, and they knew MTV, and CNN. So, and they knew Hollywood movies. So, and music, they knew music. So, and what did we know of Russia? Like less than that. Yeah, we didn't know anything. We just thought they all wanted to kill us, right? Like that was our whole mindset. And as an American at the time, I think a lot of people don't. People forgotten. What the Cold War culture was in hindsight, right? And what it was like to go to nuclear fallout shelters and hide under your desk as a kid and all those sort of things. So it was a pretty far-fetched thing. Now, we had gone and jumped off the Berlin Wall in February of that year, 1990, and we went to through East Berlin and East Germany, and we saw the empty stores, the no food, the closed restaurants. We saw just really another world. And we had encountered, one of the things we did when we jumped off the Berlin Wall was we joked we skied the east and the west face. Of course, there's no snow in Berlin. We were landing in mud puddles. But when we landed in no man's land, to think that just months before you would have been killed to be in no man's land. Yeah. And when the East German guards pulled up to get us out of no man's land, they had no more guns, which was probably strange for them. They just saw kids in day-glow outfits and skis. They didn't know what the hell we were doing, making a movie. So they kind of shuttle us back through the hole in the wall. But, so going to Russia at that time, we had no supplies. We had no food. The Russians, we had tea. And then you had all this other cultural issues going on. We were from 9 different countries, and the lead guides were French, Chamonix elite mountain guides. They wanted nothing to do with young, hotshot American kids. We were a pain in the ass to them. Yeah. And in hindsight, I guess I never considered that the goal was not to summit. I think that was sort of like, I don't think it was the intention of the trip. Now that I think about it, I don't think the Chamonix guides thought anybody on this trip was qualified to summit. Problem was they never stated that. They never said that. Yeah. So, and we were going to movie about it, and I'm a promoter, so I was going to make a big deal out of it. And, the combination for that is a deadly combination, which, I'm lucky to be here to share this insight about, but, that storm easily could have killed me, no doubt.
Well, I don't want to ruin the story because I think you should read it for yourself, listener, if you can. But it's a great book and it's an amazing story. But you had you were close to death. You summited. That's fair play to you, and you had that moment at the top. But after that, you very nearly died. And I'm curious to know about a little bit more about the kind of the whole near-death experiences that you had on that, if you're willing to talk about them.
Yeah, that was, I was alone in a snow cave that I had dug, and I had been abandoned in by some fellow expedition members. By the time I found myself into that snow cave, I had been on the hill since 6:30 in the morning without food or water, and it was probably midnight. I was exhausted. I was dehydrated. I was somewhere between 15,000 and 17,000 feet. And I had just spent hours digging this cave with my feet and my hands in an ice axe. So I was sweating from the inside. I do credit Degree 7 clothing that was bomber-proof, really warm stuff for saving my life. Might as well have been wearing a sleeping bag. It was so, worthy of the challenge. But, for me, I had, when I passed out in that cave, I had a lot of different apparitions, and one would be described as a white light moment. I believe I met my guardian angels, and they were telling me to follow them. And we were lost at the time. The reason why we dug snow caves was we were in the middle of the crevasse field, and we were lost. And we had, prior to digging the caves, we had performed a crevasse rescue. Me and another Russian saved the guy out of the hole. And, so that was, for me, this idea of follow me, I didn't want to go with them. Now, what were they saying to me, in this apparition? Where were they going to take me? I remember having the really clear thought that if I go with them, if I did pass through, I'm going to be fine. But this would be really hard on my brother, I didn't know where he was, down below. That really had the thought that death is a human experience. For the spirit, it's a joyful experience. And then I would wake up from that apparition and vomit blood and shake and shiver. And I had another more comical apparition that somebody had brought me from a convenience store, hosted, Twinkies and munchies, to eat. But, years later, I come to realize that those guardian angels did exactly what they said. They guided me down through the crevasses. And so I've changed my perspective on that. I think they actually did what they were sent to do, which the next day, Sasha, who found me in my snow cave and I believe kept me alive, we rescued 14 people, and we navigated the ice fields in a storm successfully. You know, we did a total of 3 crevasse rescues in over the 38 hours. But you know, that was quite something. But you touch on something because I have never really spoken about this. We did make a movie, and I was interviewed, within a week after that trip. And that interview is pretty powerful, but and we did put that in parts of that interview in a film. But one of the reasons why I never really spoke about it is I didn't think people would believe me. And my friend Claudio Abate died on that trip. We say in the book that 15 people died. The numbers are some say it was almost double that. Yeah. We could verify 15. And over the years, I myself have said more, but for the sake of not exaggerating, we could count 15. But Claudio died alone in a snow cave, similar to my situation. And the reason why they found him after the storm was his hand was sticking out of the snow. And he was actually alive when they found him, but they didn't have any helicopters or anything like that, so they put him on the sled with the other dead bodies, and he died in transportation. Wow. But when I think about that, that easily could have been me. Sasha found my ice axe outside the cave. That's how he knew I was in there. And there's some other things that we talk about in the book, which really are quite hard to believe in today's day and age. But because of the Cold War and everything, and with the proper prospect of that day, make total sense. We were in Russia during a time when Albania, the first breakaway republic, protested on May Day in Red Square. And that Albanian walked into Red Square wrapped in sheets and lit himself on fire. That was quite an event. So, the USSR was crumbling at the time, and the Cold War was a real thing. And it was a tumultuous time in world history. What we found, and what we always found, and we went on a quest to do this over the years, was to travel to war-torn areas and find commonalities between mountain people. And that's really what was the end result of my experience. Kindness, compassion. Sasha saved my life. When we skied with the Kurds during the first Persian Gulf War and the border with Turkey and Iraq, we found the same thing there. When we skied in Romania after the revolution, we found the same thing there. When I snuck into Beirut, Lebanon, for my peace ski, I found the same thing there with the Middle Eastern culture. People in the mountains curious about each other and kind. Yeah. And so I think that's a big draw to skiing. I think that's what keeps people coming back to the mountains, is they meet strangers and become friends. And we try to sort of have that theme throughout all our films over our career.
Will you, we'll leave the reader of the book to discover the interesting thing about Sasha, which I think is fascinating. But would you describe yourself as religious before that moment, or did that come kind of after that?
No, I'm raised. I'm of Catholic heritage.
You can't escape that coming from Boston, can you?
Yeah, it's part of the deal. And what I say is my family is soaked in it. We are bathed and baptized in Catholicism, and when I was a young boy, sitting in the pews, listening to the priest tell me that Jesus was going to save me, I always wondered, from what? What the hell do I need for? What? I got my mom, my dad. We're doing all right here. Like, save me from what? And I, over life, I think sometimes you gain perspective, like, oh, well, he helped there, or that helped here, faith helped here. My spirituality got me through that one. Just in perseverance alone, part of the human condition we were talking about earlier is being grateful, and also part of the human experience is suffering, and why. And so I've always been curious about all of that, and I think what happened in Elbrus was an awakening of that. I was a rebellious kid. I was an unruly dude, and I think it was an awakening to a bigger purpose. And we dedicate the book to my uncle Dan, who was my mother's twin, who died in Korea. He was a pilot in the war. And my brother Dan, who died as a baby. He was older than me before I was born. And my cousin Dan. There were all these Dans that passed. And in my grandparents' kitchen, there was the family tree. And as a kid, I would sit in that kitchen, the same kitchen my mom grew up in, and ski down the middle of the parkway and look at dead Dans on the wall. And I think there was something in me that kind of wondered about my own fate. What did the future hold for this Dan? And I think escaping Elbrus with a really near miss, pretty damn close, kind of put me on a track to ask questions and to seek more. I had always been a seeker, but to seek more. And I think that from that perspective is why I wrote the book 30 years afterwards, because I had never wanted my story to end with that story. Yeah, I wanted to begin with that story. And my entire adult life has been shaped by Elbrus.
Okay. How are you doing for time? I've got two other things I'd love to ask you, but if you're pushed, we can let them go.
I'm all yours, my friend.
All right, that's jolly decent of you. Let me ask you two more things, if that's all right. One, we share a common thing in that I'm a little bit behind you, but it must be 7 or so years ago now, I gave up drinking for good. I just didn't want to do it anymore. And I know that you did the same a long, long time ago, and it probably was a little bit harder when you were doing it. But I don't know, I suppose it's hard for anyone anytime they give up. But I personally, my experience of that, well, one, it's very, very difficult to do in the ski industry. So much of what happens in the ski industry revolves around alcohol, and to a secondary extent, I'd say probably drugs. And I don't know, what it gave, I personally had enough. But I came to a gradual realisation that I just didn't want to do this anymore. And my life since that point has been so productive that you would not believe, like night and day. You can get so much more done. What was I'd love to hear your perspective on that, on sobriety, being a sober person within skiing.
Yeah, not easy, man. Congratulations.
Yeah, I don't find it I want to say, I'm not a guy who's going to AA meetings and all that sort of stuff. I just had enough. I didn't want to do it anymore, so I stopped.
Yeah, for me, I was, I was, look, in the 70s and the 80s, was all to play for, so to speak, in Boston. And it was a pretty wild time. And growing up in a big family and hanging out with older kids, as we talked about, I was exposed to a lot of things. My mom was right. It wasn't age appropriate for me to hang out with kids who were 8 years older than me. I learned to drive and drove frequently on the highways at age 13. I was introduced to, substances and drinking. I had seen a lot of people drink and drive, and I drank and drove a lot. Never really thought otherwise. I thought that's what everybody did. And in my life, that's what a lot of people did. After Elbrus, I had tried to stop partying. I always say I didn't have a drinking problem, I had a partying problem. I had too much fun. And
especially living in ski resorts, right? Like, it's just like being a kid in a candy shop. It's like being on holiday all the time.
Every day. And, think of, we're traveling to the top resorts around the world, right? And we're being hosted by those resorts. We're being celebrated when we roll into town as a Warren Miller film crew, right? So, it ramped me up to a whole new level. And I was all about it. I enjoyed sort of the notoriety of that, and lived the life. We hit it as hard at night as we did during the day, and we got up all day and hit it harder, and skied hard. It was not without its problems. You can't compete on the World Pro Mogul Tour hungover. It's hard to do. You can try and compete on the World Pro Mogul Tour on hallucinogenics, but I'll tell you, that's hard to do too. After Elbrus, I was kind of in a world of hurt. I was in a situation where, I had lost friends. There was a lot of blame. I shouldn't have, you should have turned around. Why'd you go past turnaround time? You put yourself in that situation. So a lot of finger pointing. I had lived through something and experienced things I didn't think people would understand or believe me. And I was, in the city of Boston, you talk about climbing and skiing Mount Elbrus, they don't know where the hell that is. My friends back here, they didn't know what the hell was going on. And, really my brother and others, the film crew, were like, you didn't die. What's up? You're good. So I was in a bad place, and that kind of changed the nature of my partying. And so I needed to get some help, and I did. I had some people in my life at the time that saw a kid that needed some help and offered help. And I took it, and like you say, it's a rocket fuel. Waking up clear-eyed every day, possibilities and not regret, and not living from a place of shame, but a place of can-do. Your world changes, and so that happened for me. It's been 31 years for me, being involved in the UK ski industry as involved as I have been over the years. We ran the first ski test for the UK here in New England in the 90s with Fall Line magazine, and had a long run, with the UK and Snow and Rock for a long time. And, I knew a lot of crazy, Brits and I knew a lot of sober Brits. I just think that there's a lot of power and clarity, and that's what sobriety's done for me.
Yeah. Okay. Last question. I think I don't know. I was just on someone's Facebook channel watching some clips from the Free Ride World Tour.
Yeah.
I wonder what your perspective on the Free Ride World Tour is, because I don't get it, don't understand it. I'm sure it has its purpose, and for someone's organising it, someone's making money out of it, and I'm sure, but the concept of judged off-piste skiing, like the stuff that you were doing back in the day, now judged and prize given. I know that you were quite scathing in the book about the initial attempts to organise something like that. I think it was in Alaska. It doesn't. What it seems to have morphed into is, what big tricks can you do down this face off of various features? I saw a guy doing a double backflip and stuff. That to me is not what skiing sort of freely is. It's not very to my eyes, doesn't look very stylish. That's a personal opinion. There's no grace to it. It looks like you've got guys picking their way down faces so that they can perform a flip off of a certain cliff. I'm sure, don't get me wrong, that is an extremely incredible thing to do. But for me, it kind of takes away the ethos of what extreme skiing was about. How do you feel about that these days?
Well, when I look at the Olympics, I always say summer or winter games. What you're witnessing is the mutation of sport, right? Mm-hmm. Somebody once said, "Hey, grab your skates and let's race around the pond." And now we're speed skating, right? Mm-hmm. The mogul skier can't slalom ski. The park kid can't be a downhill racer. Like, there's no crossover, right? Their specialty. Mm-hmm. So then you have to ask yourself why. Well, in specialization and in new school or the extreme world, we use the word progression. And progression is important aspect to what they're trying to prove, right? We have to do it differently. Mm-hmm. Nobody wants to dress like their parents, right? So yeah. There's an identity. What do I think about it? I think that whenever you add in judging, you limit, not expand. You build boundaries, you don't break them. And the kid, I watch those clips. As a journalist, I cover the World Tour. Look, I can't do it. I couldn't have done it then. Definitely can't do it now. People ask me a question: where is it all going to go? Where's it stop? Right? If they're going to throw a double back, on a face that never really got skied even before, or in the conditions would never think about skiing it, which is what they're doing. They're on a schedule. They got to get it done. They're putting kids in really dangerous situations. The injuries are through the roof. I've said to the organizer of the X Games, what's going to happen when somebody dies live on TV? Their answer happens in NASCAR.
Serious?
That's a terrible answer, and but it's their answer. So we're gonna, we see it. We've had plenty of athletes die in the World Tour. One was too many, and there's been others. But the kids want to take the risk. The money's there to do it. The skill level's there to do it. But it's a different sport. It's a mutant of backcountry skiing, and it has its place. Turning, although they'll tell you turning and fluidity and line matter, but it doesn't. The air matters. Mm-hmm. What you see, what Elbrus taught me and other accidents taught me through my ski career is that life is fragile. And skiing around rocks increases the fragility of it all, So I don't know. They're very close to the edge. But where's it all going to go? And I think that Shane McConkey was on the forefront of where it's going and where what we see. That in extreme sports, we're going to see a morphing of, it's going to be multi-sport. Mm-hmm. The next phase is somebody's going to do that with a wingsuit, right? Yeah. Or a speed flyer, right? Mm-hmm. They're bound to have speed flying competitions if they don't already. They're going to, right? So this idea of multi-sport, and I just interviewed and got off the phone with a guy who was a speed flyer who, broke his back. So, life is fragile. And his thought when he woke up from his 10-day coma was, I've blown it. I had it all, and I blew it. And, that's one hell of a way to...
In what sense did he think he had it all? Like in terms of his sport or just life in general?
In life. He was healthy. Yeah. Yeah. So, what a statement, right? My next project's called Dying to Ski. It's about all my dead friends, professional friends. And, in that in this project that we're working on now is, is dying doing what you love a good death? That's the question we ask. My perspective is that sport is designed to enhance your life, not end it. And so you have to ask the athlete, if his life's being enhanced. And if it is, then that's sort of the nature of sport.
Yeah.
But the best answer I've ever gotten from is dying doing what you love a good death is a pretty famous skier's widow saying to me, he loved me more. And I was happy to hear that because I'm glad she knew it. And I now, when I go to work in Europe, I spend 6 weeks working in Europe in avalanche terrain. I spend time here in the States and off-piste and out of bounds. I tell my family and my loved ones, I'm going to work. This is if I die, please don't say I died doing what I love. I love you more. And I think that's perspective. I think it's one, the gift of age, but two, I think at some point there has to be a reality check on where we're going with this whole thing. But as long as, and we talk about this in the book, as long as there's young men seeking adventure, we're going to have all sorts of things happen. So it's a fun, wild world. I think our job as mentors to the industry is to raise the question and to in ways raise awareness so that people can decide. And people always decide. People thought I was crazy, and they were right. So.
Well, look, I heartily recommend your book. It was a great read. 30 Years in the White Haze. And what I'll do is I'll add some links as to where one could find it. But is there anything else you want to add? Because everyone who comes on this gets a chance to plug themselves. And I know that you run ski clinics in the US and in France. So do you want to tell us a little bit about that too?
Yeah, skiclinics.com. You can check out my whole schedule. We're this year we'll be in Engelberg, we'll be in Zermatt, we'll be in Lax, we'll be in Val d'Isère, of course, with my good friend Henry Schneewin. And we'll be over at the Snow Show coming up here in October. I'll be doing a book tour through Ellis Brigham's locations in and around, so people can come find me and grab a book. That'd be fun, and talk about trips and ski stories. And that's one of the real special things about doing projects like this is the people you meet, they and how they connect with the book and why. And there's a lot of people in the book, a lot of memories for people in this book about the era and the time and the people. So I think
that's for sure. We have a lot of listeners in the US as well, so you should probably tell them where you're going to be if you're doing a book tour in the US as well.
Yeah, you bet. If you go to white-haze.com or dan-egan.com, you can see the whole tour. But I'll be in Colorado coming up here in mid to late September in the Vail area in Copper Mountain, and then I'll be at the Denver Ski Show in early November, and of course all over the East Coast here in New England and Boston at the Boston Ski Show. And my winter home is at Big Sky. You can come ski with me there at my Dan Egan Steep Camps. We run them all winter long, right out of Big Sky, the biggest skiing in America. It's amazing.
I love it. This will be great for all the listeners over in the US, because like my podcast is often accused of being a bit British centric, even though I'm kind of based in Switzerland, and it's the nature of kind of the people I know, I guess. But I'm really, really glad that I've managed to have you on and have this perspective and kind of fill in a little bit of background colour also to these books that I've been reading about, the American Midwest and Boston as well. So I'm really, really pleased to have done this. Thank you so much.
Thanks for your time, David, and look forward to seeing you. I hope we can ski.